You wrote for All in the Family and Maude. You must have had a sense at the time of what groundbreaking series those were.
All in the Family, absolutely. All in the Family changed the character of our country. It's amazing if you think about it. All of a sudden, it was all right to talk about bigotry. It opened up that door, and it was an amazing accomplishment. Just, instead of holding back and talking about certain things only in your house, here it was public. Bigots and how you react, and it was great. It was
Did
good.
you feel, collectively as a group of writers that you were working on something more than just another television show?
Absolutely. I've never felt that on any other show. I've written so many shows, but that had meaning. That, yeah.
So, after All in the Family and Bob Hope, you came up with a premise for Different Strokes. Talk about that.
That wasn't my premise. Two writers, whose names elude me, wrote a television script, a pilot script about a little boy. And I got on the show through a friend, Bud Grossman, who wanted me to be with him on that show. And we went to a meeting at NBC. There was Bud, Howard Leeds, and I. And Freddie Silverman, who was, the head guy, and all the junior executives. And they were talking about wondering what we're going to do with this pilot script that they bought. And it turned out that Fred Silverman didn't like the script, but he liked the kid that they had cast. Gary Coleman. This really short black kid. And we started talking about coming up with a pilot, and Silverman said, "Oh, let's not do a pilot. Let's just do the show." So now, Bud Grossman. Bud was the head writer. Then there was Howard Leeds, who was going to be his producer, co-producer, and I was the consultant, story consultant. So now we had to write a script, come up with a story. And we came up with the story, and now who was going to write it? Well, Bud said he didn't want to write it. Howard didn't want to write it. I love writing. I said, I'll write it. So I wrote the first script for Different Strokes. In it, we had come up with an idea for a housekeeper. I had just done something for Garrett, for Lila Garrett. Lila is a good writer, very politically oriented, tough gal. And I thought for fun, I suggested we name the housekeeper Mrs. Garrett. I never told Lila. So now I write a script, and we're casting it, and we need a Mrs. Garrett. Everybody seemed to want who played Mrs. Garrett?
Charlotte Rae.
Charlotte Rae. Thank you. They wanted Charlotte Rae. Charlotte Rae was handled by my agent. And Charlotte Rae was a pain in the ass, a major pain in the ass. And my agent would talk to her about, you want to do this show? They're doing a pilot. And she was giving them trouble. And finally, I took it on myself. I called Al Burton, who was the Norman Lear's second in command. And I said to him, I'll get us Charlotte Rae. I called my agent and said, listen, they're going with somebody else. I'm just telling you that. Boom, 10 minutes later, we had her. So we got Charlotte Rae. She was perfect for the part of Mrs. Garrett. She was truly funny, you know, but she is a very difficult lady to deal with. I mean, you know, some of these actors and actresses, they aren't in real life what they present, as we know. And, but she delivered. She delivered for the show, big time.
And so you were responsible for creating
I
that
was
character.
For that character, absolutely. And the show became an immediate hit.
Were you surprised by that?
Not really, because once I saw the kid, this little Gary Coleman, this little kid was a born showman. He read lines like an old pro. What you talking about? You know, and we had two other kids, Willis and Kimberly, Todd Bridges and Dana Plato.
And were you involved in the casting at all of them?
Yeah, the writers were part of looking at and making decisions. And of course, the star, the so-called star of the show, Conrad Bain, good actor. Conrad was the nominal star of the show, but nobody could compete with the kid.
But he had a great deal.
Oh, God, yes. And I'm glad. He's a nice man. But the kid, I used to grab him every time he ran by. I'd grab him and kiss him.
Conrad had to be the highest paid person, a cast member on the show, correct?
Absolutely.
So every time Gary Coleman got a raise.
I'm sure. And Gary, that kid was so abused financially. Here's this kid. The whole show rested on him. You know, the show ran like 11 years. He had a manager, and eventually, you know, I think Gary was adopted. Gary's parents, who were very nice people, everybody ripped the kid off.
And he had health issues.
Major health. The kid had one kidney. And this little kid the energy was there. The whole show was the kid. And he would get tired. And he had somebody was assigned to him, you know, to make sure they went to school and all of that. And, but we worked late. It's a real problem. You're dealing with kids. You know, a lot of people think it's a half-hour show, so you shoot it in a half hour. We know different, right? And sometimes you're there till 1 a.m. And now you got a little kid, and he's tired and falling asleep. On the other hand, you have to finish. You got to get what you have to get, you know. So that was always a problem. But the kid was a trooper. God.
How'd you come up with what you're talking about?
He read it. It was written. What are you talking about, Willis?
It was written, "What are you talking about?" Yeah.
And the kid said, "What you talking about?" Hello? That was it. We used that phrase a number of times on every show.
You referred to it as the "what you," right?
I don't recall that.
Did you have rules about how many times in a show?
No, you just felt you didn't want to overdo it. Just a couple of times, you know. Sometimes just once. But one time he was running by, I was talking to my mother. And I said, "Come here." I grabbed him. I said, "Say hello to my mother." And he said, "Your mother is alive?" I think I was like in my 40s or something, you know. What a kid. He wrote a book. We all bought the book, you know. Talented kid.
He demanded, or his parents or his agents demanded money, right, and shut down the show briefly.
His agents. They recognized what they had and got a lot of money, which I don't think the kid ever saw. You know, a lot of money, and it was shameful.
Talk about Todd Bridges and Dana Plato, because they had tough...
Yeah, Todd was a talented kid. He was understandably jealous of Gary, who just got all the attention. Todd was a good-looking boy. We had the Jackson girl. Who's the one who sings?
Janet.
Janet Jackson. Her first stint as an actress, she played Todd Bridges' girlfriend. And I remember taking her aside, and I said, "Sweetie, you know, you ought to talk a little louder." She was so reticent, you know. Her first show, Janet Jackson, wow. And she went on to expose herself later. And anyway, it was exciting, but Todd had an understandable resistance to all the attention the kid got. Dana was a sweet girl. She was adopted. She wasn't a rocket scientist. She was just a nice, sweet kid, and I was not surprised, you know, years later when she got into all that trouble and she was out of money and she got a disguise. She bought a disguise for herself, hair and whatever else she did. And she went into some record store or something with a gun and said, "Give me money." And they gave her money. She ran out. The person picked up the phone, called the police, and said, "I was just held up by Dana Plato." She bought a disguise and couldn't disguise herself, you know. Poor kid.
You had a sense of all of this difficulty working with them.
Yes, I always wondered if Todd was going to get into some trouble. And I was right, but thank God he straightened out because he was charged. Good-looking kid, and the little kid getting all the attention. I didn't know what was going to happen with Dana, but at one point, I got a call one night they found Dana lying in front of a house. She was drugged out of her head, you know, and apparently in questioning her, they found out who she was, and she told them to call me, and they called me, and I talked to them, so it didn't get in the papers and whatever. But that indicated to me she was going to be in major trouble, and she was.
Did the show was produced by Norman Lear's company.
Right.
And the working conditions on All in the Family and Maude were long hours. Did you try and set up a more humane working
Absolutely. First of all, Norman had nothing to do with Different Strokes. Nothing. The three guys, Howard and Martin and I, ran the show. And I'm a stickler. You wanted me to be there 9 in the morning, I'll be there 9 in the morning. And I would get there 9 in the morning, and Howard and Martin would segue in, like 20 minutes later, a half hour, and I said, hey guys, we have to have a talk. Either name the time, whatever you want, but we all come. And they agreed. And we used to get there at 9 in the morning, and I got to tell you, we would leave around 6 at night, except on those nights where you have to be there for
filming,
run-throughs and the show and all that. We were running a tight ship, and it was fun. I had so much fun on that show. I've always been sorry that I never took piano lessons. Well, I had one, and then in my first piano lesson, the kids from outside called and said, hey, come on, we're going to play baseball. And I went to the window, and I looked down there, and I looked at the piano teacher, and he says, what is it going to be? Piano or baseball? I said, baseball. But I've always liked music. So what I did was, on my desk, I had a keyboard, a flat paper keyboard, pasted down like a piano. And I'd have my door open, and I recorded some great piano player. And I had the recording ready. And if I saw a stranger coming, I'd turn on the recorder, and I'd sit at my desk and do this. And great piano was coming out. And I'd watch out of the corner of my eye as a stranger walked by and passed my door. And sure enough, in 2 beats, he'd be back watching, and I'd be, why not have fun,
Did you ever try to intervene, you or the other producers try to intervene with Gary or with Todd or with Dana?
Oh, yeah. We would try to talk to them. I once said something to Todd. Todd wore glasses at a certain point. I knew he wore glasses for reading. And we would have a reading on Monday, I think it was. Everybody would be there, including people from the network, NBC. And it's very important that you do a good reading, because the network guys, if they hear a joke that isn't right, they don't say to themselves, somebody read it wrong. They'll say, you ought to take that, And I became aware that Todd was not wearing his glasses. So I took him aside and said, you have to wear your glasses. It's not fair to the rest of us or anybody. When you're not wearing your glasses, you misread words, then they think it doesn't play. Next thing I know, his father wants to see me. So there's a meeting, his father and Todd and me, and I think the director. And he says, how dare you say that to my kid? And I said, well, because he's supposed to read. And I explained to him. So that was the extent of getting involved. Executives can drive you crazy. They're there from the network to do their best, but everyone thinks he's a genius or feels compelled to make a contribution. good or bad. Everybody rewrites writers. That's why there's a joke, you want to read my script? A guy who holds you up can hand you a script, or the postman. So, from your end, to protect the show, you have to be on guard. And whether it's a kid not wearing his glasses, or who gives a... Wear your glasses,
And you were on the show for a number of years.
I was on for 4 years, and then I got the... I left to do a play.
I want to ask you a couple more questions on
Okay, good.
Your title changed over the course of the 4 years. Was your role pretty much the same?
No. After the first season, they made me a producer. And then, of course, it changed.
So what changed about that?
I got more money. And besides that, here's how we wrote. Howard and Marty and I would get into a room and start pitching a story until we came up with a story. And then one of us would write it. And we also, it wasn't like today where age mattered. We would get scripts submitted. And you'd read a script, you didn't care if it was written by a woman or a man or how old they were. If the script showed promise, we'd say, bring that person in. And we'd bring in woman, man, young, old, didn't matter. And we'd encourage them to pitch story ideas to us. And we helped them. We helped them an awful lot. And then we'd buy a story and give them a shot at writing the script. And then Howard and Marty and I would rework it,
Was there anybody notable who came out of that process that you remember? Whose career started on Different Strokes?
Not really, no. But a couple went on, and we were pleased with that.
Now, where were you in the process of Mrs. Garrett getting spun off into her own series?
Oh, Howie and Marty and I worked together, and there was a hiatus coming up, and Al Burton approached us. He said, we have like a half-finished script, a pilot script, where it's for Charlotte Ray to run a kind of a school or something, Would you guys do it? And we said, sure. Marty didn't want to do it. He was going to Florida, and he figured nothing's going to happen, So Howard Leeds and I we took this half-finished pilot script that they had bought, and we fixed it so that it could fit inside
Different Strokes.
a Different Strokes show. And we developed it. We got a contract. And because I had written the very first Different Strokes show, and that pilot that they had bought, that Silverman had bought and thrown away, did not include a housekeeper whom I named Mrs. Garrett. I got credit for that character, and under the Guild rules, if you create a character who is then used further, you get X dollars, Well, I created Mrs. Garrett. Anyway, Howard and I had a deal, and we developed the show. They did it, and it was bought for a series. It ran 12 years.
Did you have any other involvement after that?
None whatsoever.
And how did you handle Charlotte Ray leaving Different Strokes? Were you concerned about that?
No, because that's about the time I left.
So it's someone else's problem.
Someone else's problem, and I ran off, to do other things.
And you did a play.
I did a play. I've had, I think, 4 plays produced. One on Broadway, called The Family Way, and there's another one, the one I liked that Frank wanted to do, and the one I did in England, The Button. The Button's been translated in Spanish and French. It plays around the world. I have another play, On the Level, which I'm still trying to hustle. That had an interesting history. We were going to Broadway with On the Level, and the star was Herschel Bernardi. And Herschel took a vacation before we got into rehearsal, and he passed away. So after that, got a good guy, Judd Hirsch. Judd Hirsch wanted to do it. I got Judd Hirsch, and I said, there's a young girl I'd love to get, Cynthia Nixon. And Judd said, that's the girl I want. We got Cynthia Nixon. And we had a big reading at the Barrymore Theater in New York. Everybody loved it. And while we were raising money, Judd Hirsch got a series. Then Ed Asner got the play. I don't know how he did it. He got the play. And we were going to go with Ed Asner. We had a commitment in Florida, and Delbert Mann, Oscar winner, was going to direct my play. We were going to go to Florida, do 4 weeks with Ed Asner, and then come maybe on the road and then go into New York. And the last day of our contract with Ed, we had already made plans to go to Florida and all of that. The Morris office convinced Ed Asner that he could make more money without having to face reviewers, the critics. And they're right in that an actor like Ed Asner can make a 2-hour movie for $250,000 or whatever the hell it is, And so that play has kicked around. It played in Florida, and it won. There's a whole theater
Circuit.
A circuit of theaters. And my play won Best Play, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director. There are only 2 people in the play, So I have that play that's always just about ready to go, So I'm into plays. I love plays,
And you also, post Facts of Life, you were involved with Silver Spoons.
Yes, we created Silver Spoons.
How did you come up with that premise?
Howard and Marty and I sat down because we were so hot, Different Strokes was a smash. They used to take us to eat at the Palm for lunch. Get it? We sat down, we came up with this idea, and they liked it, and we were going to do the pilot. And they brought in 2 people to rewrite the pilot. They tried to ace us, but they couldn't. Because at one point, I was chairman of the Screenwriters Credit Committee. That's as high as you can get in arbitration. So I knew all about these games people play. And I knew what to write, just write the truth, so they couldn't get our names off. And we, the three of us, ended up selling our rights to
Columbia.
To Columbia, yeah. So we did okay, but
You didn't stay involved.
not at all. I never watched the show. I never saw the show. I don't know.
And was that the last major show that you created? For television?
For television, yeah, it was. That was it for TV, and since then, nobody will touch me anyway. I'm over 40.
Let's let's talk about a few people that we haven't touched on in the interview, and give us a quick anecdote.
Okay.
Martin and Lewis.
Oh, that was fun. Jerry paid for my wedding.
Tell us that.
This nice guy, Charlie Isaacs, no longer with us. Charlie liked me, and he gave me my first break working on the Al Jolson show. That was fun. Al Jolson. He and I used to talk Yiddish to each other. It was fun. It was Al Jolson, and Oscar Levant was a regular on the show. Jolie couldn't stand him. Oscar did like the last 5 minutes. He was a case. Oscar used to drink like 26 cups of coffee a day. That's before anyone even knew the word caffeine. He would come in and he'd say, I can't play today, And he was a pain in the ass. Jolie didn't like him. We did I think practically the first or second show on tape. In those days, you would do a radio show to the East Coast. Then you would do a live show, and then you do a live show to the West Coast. Now here comes tape, where you can tape a show and then play it back at least the second time, So it was exciting. But as a result of tape and cutting it down to the moment, the time, there would come a moment when you had to cut, and then you needed a joke in between to blend back. So we'd go into the conference room, and the producer would say, we need a new joke here, because we've cut a minute and a half. And everybody would pitch jokes. In that conference room was Jolie, Charlie Isaacs, Manny Manheim, who was ostensibly the head writer, but was only a handshaker, and Oscar Levant, myself, and a script girl. So we need a joke, and Oscar picks a joke. Oscar Levant. He's a pretty funny guy. Pitches, and Jolie says, no. I pitch a joke, and Jolie says, let's do the kids' joke. And Oscar Levant, this famous man, making all that money, he says, my joke was funnier than his, Levant was really weird. We would have lunch brought in from the Brown Derby, sandwiches for everybody. And whatever the sandwich was, you took, Levant was the only guy who ordered a certain sandwich. So they bring in the box, everyone puts in a hand. I take a sandwich and I'm eating, and now Levant is rummaging. He says, is anybody eating a roast beef with this or that? And I say, yeah, I am. He says, that's my sandwich. I said, it doesn't have your name on it. I just took... He was strange, but he was funny. Levant got his own talk show with his wife. And here's a joke he once said. I was watching the show. Brilliant joke. He said, I've often wondered, if a man and a wife have an argument and they aren't talking, and the wife sneezes, does the man have to say Gesundheit? It's a great, if you think about it. really, what a dilemma. Not talking is one thing, but this is, you're supposed to say, God bless you. Oh, but he was, but anyway, Jolie, it was such a pleasure to be with him. So Charlie got me on that show, and then Charlie became head writer on the Martin and Lewis radio show. And he called me, and wow. And they were going to go to Chicago for a whole month, staying at the Ambassador East, the hotel. And the girl I was going to marry, Gloria, no longer with us, unfortunately, she was from Chicago. So it worked out great. When she came in, Jerry called the newspaper people. I didn't know he had done that. The entire audience for my show was Jerry's wife and his gopher, a nice guy. And under the chuppah was Charlie Isaacs, Bob Red, the producer, Sheldon Leonard, the actor who became a big producer, who was a regular on the Martin and Lewis show, and a friend of my father's. And Jerry paid for, he had a wedding party for her. Jerry was very, very generous. Jesus, he really was.
And you ran into him at Trader Vic's on your anniversary.
Yes, I did. But let me tell you something funny that Dean said. Dean had a different sense of humor. Jerry could start and I'd be crying. Dean had great wit. Sheldon and Charlie Isaacs and I brought a Christmas present to Dean. We knocked on the door, gave him the present, and he says, "Oh, fellas, you should have done it." Just offbeat, you know? And one night, or years later, we were taking two friends, my wife and I, to Trader Vic's, our favorite restaurant, and Jerry was there. So I went over and said hello and all that. And then Jerry and his group left. And when it came time for the checks, Jerry had picked up the tab for us, you know. Very generous. And I wrote a movie for Dean. I punched up a movie. And I learned a lesson on that movie. It's called Texas Across the River. Mike Gordon was directing it. He directed my play on Broadway. It was supposed to be a comedy, and I was writing. I punched up a movie for. Who was the producer who did all the Doris Day movies? Hunter.
Ross Hunter.
Ross Hunter. I punched up a movie for Ross Hunter. And I had fun for a week, and I ended up with my name on it. And he spread the word, and I got a call to punch up a movie called Texas Across the River. It starred Dean Martin and Alain Delon. Alain Delon, a French actor. Nice guy. And I had so much fun with that show, with that movie. And Dean was on it, you know. So I got to see Dean again, and it was a funny movie. God, there were Indians in the movie. And I would have subtitles. I'd have the Indian speaking Indian and then subtitles in English. And at a certain point, I switched it. I had the Indian speaking English and the subtitles were smoke signals and, you know. It was just a blast. It was a blast. And Dean was on in that movie, you know. So it was not...
Let's get a quick... reflection on a few other names.
Okay.
Arthur Hiller.
Arthur, what a sweetheart. What a dear guy. Um, I've known Arthur for many, many years. I met him actually on Our Man Flint. Saul David had a party, and he had Jim Coburn was there, and Arthur Hiller, and that's how my wife and I met Arthur and his wife Gwenny. And we've been very, very close friends. In fact, my daughter Carol was married at Arthur's house. He's got a castle, and the greatest backyard you've ever seen. A hilly, grassy hill, perfect place, you know. And I got Arthur into, I have a lunch group. We meet every 2 weeks. The following people: Sid Caesar, Carl Reiner, Monty Hall. I got Arthur in, Arthur Hiller, Gary Owen, terrific guy, Hal Cantor, Howard Leeds, Rocky Kalish, John Rappaport, and myself. We meet every 2 weeks at Cantor's.
Factors.
At Factors. We're a fixture now. There's a room that's a room between the main dining area and the patio. So you have to pass and that room has become our room. They sent photographers, and there's a picture of all of us on the wall, and it's an absolute ball. It's a ball.
And tell us about Sid.
Sid. I wrote 2 movies for Sid. The Spirit is Willing and The Busy Body. And became friends with Sid, and now we're really close because of the lunch. I call him the king. He's still got all his marbles. He's frail. He's quite frail. He has a couple guys who drive him, and, you know, and Sid sits in his spot, and then there's Monty, and then I sit next to Monty, and go around the table. Sid is, politically, this group is just an incredible group. When we meet for lunch, we start talking about politics. Who's trying to screw Israel? We take care of politics. Then we're on showbiz. And you can't get better than Sid and Carl Reiner about stories, old stories, funny jokes. They'll drive you crazy. They know every shtick there is, you know. But everybody at the table is deaf. Some of them are half blind. And I said to them, guys, if we arrange our tables, our chairs at a certain angle, nobody would ever hear anybody. And people are always over-talking. So every once in a while, I'll clink my glass and say, hey, guys, Sid is telling a story, for God, you know. But it's such a great group, you know. And I introduced Arthur to them, and I was so glad he loves it. You know, it's fun. And we all look forward to, we meet on Wednesdays, you know.
Larry Gelbart.
Larry Gelbart. I knew Larry when he was a kid. God, he was bright. You saw it right away. The kid, he's 16 years old or something, you know. And we all know the story, how he got his start. His father was a very well-known barber, and he used to cut Danny Thomas's hair, and he kept talking to Danny Thomas about my kid who's so bright. And Danny Thomas says, okay, let me see something he's written already, you know. And Larry wrote some jokes. That was it. That was the beginning. Nice guy. He was I was so surprised. And he said something so funny at a lunch. We were having lunch with you and
Stanley.
I don't know if everybody knows about you and your adopted fathers. I met Dan when he was just a kid. We've been having lunch for over 20 years, every Saturday. And Dan met a fellow named Stanley Ralph Ross, who kind of adopted Dan here. Dan had parents in Schenectady, lovely people. And so I met Dan. Somehow, Dan then got involved with the Fox movie, the Fox TV series MASH, where Dan met Larry. And Larry Gelbart adopted him, and I adopted him. So Dan had 3 adoptive fathers in California. When Dan got his lawyer's certificate, the 3 of us were out there in Pasadena, and when they said, will all the future lawyers rise, I rose. I took the oath, and to this day I claim I'm an attorney, and Dan sent me one of his cards that I'm an attorney, you know. So Larry Gelbart was, and he loved Dan, and that was a big loss, Gelbart, because politically he was never on the wrong side. Always stuck his neck out, and bright. They don't come any brighter, you know.
Cary Grant.
Cary Grant. I used to do a half-assed impersonation of Cary Grant. And I bought my clothes for years from an old friend, Dick Carroll. Very fine men's store in Beverly Hills. So one day, I had nothing to do for a couple of minutes, and I thought I would drive Dick crazy, because Cary Grant was one of his customers and gave him a lot of trouble. Grant would come in like 8 times to get something right. So on a whim, I called Dick Carroll's establishment and say, this is Cary Grant. I'm doing Grant, and I want to talk to Dick. Boom, Dick is on. What's up, Cary? And I took a shot. I said, I'm unhappy with the lapels. And Dick says, but we went through that with the lapels. We redid that. You loved the lapel. I said, I don't like the lapels. They're too wide. I want them narrow. You know, until I had him on the ropes, and my heart went out to him. So I told him, I said, relax, it's me, you know. Now one day, it's a Sunday, I'm home getting ready to barbecue. I'm outside getting ready, and the phone in the kitchen rings, and my wife picks it up, and she says, hello? And she says sarcastically, oh, it's Cary Grant? And I had told her the story with Dick, and she was going to get ready to say bullshit, you know. So I race inside, I grab the phone. It was really Cary Grant. I had sent him a play on what have you got to lose? And he read the play, and he liked it, but he didn't want to go to Broadway, all of that, you know. And so it came close to my wife telling Cary Grant to go screw himself, you know.
Jack Benny.
Jack Benny was a sweetheart of a guy. Many years ago, in radio, I was president of the Guild. Periodically, we'd have a big night out for the Writers Guild, you know, dinner somewhere, you know. And we'd need entertainment. So I remember I called Jack Benny, and by God, he showed up, because he loved writers. If anyone had respect for writing, it was Jack Benny. And he showed up, and that night, I told Jack Benny that I had seen a guy at Billy Gray's comedy a little nightclub. Frankie Fontaine. Do you remember that name? Fontaine. He did voices, and he was funny. And I told Benny about that. And by God, he called him, and he became a regular on the Benny Show, you know? So, and one night we went to Trader Vic's, which at that time was my favorite restaurant. It was really a nice place. And Jack was there, so I introduced the kids to Jack, and they still talk about that, you know.
Another Jack, Jack Valenti.
Jack Valenti, that was so funny. Valenti, as you know, was Lyndon Baines Johnson's right-hand guy. Valenti had total recall. And my agent invited me to a lunch. Harold Cohn was the name. Dear, dear guy. He's gone. A lunch where it was just the business, and you talked about whatever. So the lunch was at 12 o'clock at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And I got there a drop late, and I was in the lobby, and there is Jack Valenti walking up, coming in too. Jack Valenti was the speaker for that lunch. So I said to him, Mr. Valenti, could you do me a favor? He says, what do you want? I said, let me walk into you and everyone will think I'm a big shot. He said, okay. I said, thank you. My name is Ben Starr. And he said, how was the offstage bitch Gloria? That morning in Variety, Army Archer printed an item about me. They had done a play of mine in Chicago, and I named the 4 characters, you know, the button that I had mentioned earlier. The 4 characters were named after people I knew. And we all talked about Gloria, who was my wife, but the woman that they were trying to get a hold of so she could hear the gunshot that ended her alimony. And that was in Variety that morning. This was 12 o'clock. I say, my name is Ben Starr. He says, how's the offstage bitch Gloria? Is that a memory? I mean, God, that's...
Let's spend a few minutes summing up.
Okay.
Do you currently still write?
I never stop writing. I love it.
What's your routine?
My routine is, after breakfast, I'm at the computer, and I have files of what to write for theater, endless movie ideas, and I'm working on a play right now. Because one thing about plays, nobody asks how old is the playwright. They read the play and either like it or don't like it. Only in Shakespeare Shakespeare could not get arrested in Hollywood. There's no way. If Shakespeare walked in and pitched Romeo and Juliet, they'd say, what does a man of your age know about 13-year-old kids in love? That's what they would say to him. Because that's the name of their game. But I write. I can't stop writing. And I figure I'll be writing like 20 years after I'm dead.
What's the most difficult or challenging aspect of writing for you?
Getting them to read it.
What's the most rewarding aspect?
The most rewarding is seeing it happen, particularly a stage play where people invest real money and there's an audience, a different audience, and you hear them laughing or crying if that's what you want them to do. That, Barring that, seeing a movie you've written, that's a kick. TV, it's fun to hear people laughing, but you're so used to that because that's what you do. And they should be laughing, you know.
What advice would you give to today's television writers?
Marry a rich girl. I wouldn't want to be a young person breaking into TV today. It's so sick. As I told you, when I was producing, we just read a script. Hey, bring the person in, man, woman. The age thing. In fact, I just got some money for, we won a major law case against, I don't know whom, but the guild sent me money. The ageism is real, folks. Imagine, instead of saying, God, this guy still writes great, or this woman, because you're a certain age, in other words, the madness of you have to be 20 to write a 20-year-old. You know, and this happens.
Your career has spanned literally the entire, television
and radio. I
lifespan,
started in radio.
And you started in radio.
Right.
What do you think of the changes to television in this period from the 40s to this century?
Well, the dramas have gotten better. There's no doubt about it. There's some really good writing in drama today, these one-hour shows. The comedy hasn't. Seinfeld was the last. I can watch a Seinfeld show 89 times. I do. When there's nothing political that's on, that's my first druther, I watch Seinfeld. The comedy shows, I mean, come on, folks. The hits. Is it normal for 6 young adults, 3 men, 3 women, in real life, to get together every night and discuss with each other everything about their sex lives, everything, and that's all you talk about? Where are these people from? That's not real life. And those are the shows, I haven't seen a really good, bright comedy show. In fairness to them, I've stopped watching those. I watched political shows, a few dramas, and anything truly interesting, KCET, But
how would you like to be remembered?
As a fellow who died very, very rich. I'm not there yet, but I'd like to be. No, I'd like to be remembered for who I am, just a nice guy with a great sense of humor. That's who I am, How would you like me to be remembered?
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'm very much aware of people passing away. I seem to somehow be younger in attitude than a lot of people my age. I was just 88 a couple weeks ago, And it hurts to see people becoming frail, and this goes out. Although I have great hopes for stem cell, it's going to change it all, folks. Stem cell. There will be something wrong with an eye, you'll get a new eye, it'll regrow. Makes such sense. It makes such sense. Find a cell that doesn't know what its DNA is yet and deposit it in an area that's having trouble. That cell will become and inherit the DNA of that area. They're doing it. And that cell will regrow a heart muscle, eyes. They're doing it. They're doing it already. So that's something to look forward to. But watching your friends and loved ones depart is a tough one. It's just, it happens, but more and more. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.